Hey again, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Discussions of Darkness. This week, I want to open up with a story that's going to seem a little bit irrelevant, and some of you might have already seen it floating around the internet. But stick with me, I am going somewhere with this, and I feel it's a very illustrative example as to what I'm going to be talking about going forward. But for fans of science fiction and fantasy, there is a film out there that you may fondly recall called Galaxy Quest. The basic gist of it is there's a not Star Trek show in this alternate universe, and it was popular enough, and then it eventually went off the air. But episodes of it have made their way out into outer space. They've been found by an alien species who thinks it's a documentary, and when they find themselves dealing with an alien oppressor, they come to Earth to find the heroic captain and his crew to help them free themselves and deal with their current problem. And it's got a bit of a fun cast. It's something of a cult classic, but there's a particular behind-the-scenes moment that I feel is illustrative of what we're talking about this week. And there was a particular scene where after the line was cut and everything was done, Tim Allen, who played our not Captain Kirk, was very upset. He was very shaky. He didn't quite know how to deal with what he was feeling, and he walked off set to sort of deal with what he was experiencing. And everyone on the cast and crew was sort of looking around wondering, is Tim okay? Did he hurt himself? Is something going wrong? Cue one of the greatest quips from Alan Rickman, as he just sort of looked over as, my God, I think he's just experienced acting. And it's one of those things that it's very funny in the moment, but there is a very real thing that can happen when you take yourself and you immerse yourself in a character, particularly if that character is experiencing a lot of traumatic moments, if they're dealing with some very heavy subject matter. And this is something that has come to be known as roleplay bleed. Essentially, when you play your character through very intense moments, or when you play a character for a very long time and you get very attached to them, parts of that character's experiences, despite the fact that they are not real and did not happen, can sort of bleed into the way you feel and the way you experience your life. And it's not anything as extreme as you'd see in Monsters and Mazes. We're not losing touch with reality most of the time. But it's... Our brains are very smart, but also very dumb, in that we are often unable to tell the difference between a chemical reaction caused by something that really happened and something that only happened in a fantasy, or something that only happened in a controlled environment, or something that only happened during play. And while we often think of that as something that young children experience, this is something that can dog us all the way into adulthood. It is something that, especially the more intense our imaginations become, and the more talented we get at playing make-believe, it's always going to be a risk. And while it's true for any role-playing game, the World of Darkness, with the themes and subject matter that it deals with, particularly if you're one of those groups who goes hard into difficult subject matter, if you have a lot of horror elements in your game, and if someone has played a character that has survived a lot of really difficult situations, only to be lost or to be otherwise changed by something, that can be baggage you end up carrying with you if you're not careful. And that seems silly. It seems a little hyperbolic, but anyone who has been part of an RPG circle long enough knows that just because we all put our dice down and walk away from the table doesn't mean the experiences our characters had leave us. And sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes that's why we get excited and we want to talk about the stories about like the great deeds they've accomplished and the things that happened to them in their lives and the fictional children that they had after they saved their fictional spouse from a fictional villain. But sometimes the elements of bleed can lead to issues. People end up carrying grievances from a made-up world against people who in the real world are our friends. These are people we willingly spend time with, that we enjoy being around, that we trusted enough to share this experience with. And we may end up having resentment towards them. We may end up feeling angry about things. We may end up spiraling into other negative emotions. And this can be a problem if we don't treat it seriously. And by seriously, I don't mean go and seek help and get therapy and take drugs and all of those things. It's more along the lines of when we feel something as role players, as gamers, and we have that immediate urge to be like, what am I, a child? This is dumb. I shouldn't be experiencing this. It doesn't matter whether or not you think you're too old, whether or not you know this feeling you're feeling is caused by something fake. As I said, brains can't tell the difference. The stress hormones in your brain can't differentiate between your boss walking down the hallway to check on your work and you being stalked by a lion in the undergrowth. Our brains are very good at keeping us alive, and they're very bad at telling the difference between reality and fiction. So, if roleplay bleed is a concern, or if it is something that you're worried about happening at your table, there are some things you can do to sort of mitigate it a bit. Generally speaking, the easiest way to do that is to have palate cleansers. Essentially, at the end of a session, when everyone has finished the scene and all of the director has yelled cut and everyone is allowed to move off and do their thing, have some decompression moments. Don't just end the game and have people leave and then deal with all their own feelings by themselves. Have a bit of a round robin. Ask people, hey, what was something you liked tonight? What was something you didn't like tonight? What is a thing you kind of want to see in the future or that you're excited about? What are your predictions going forward? And this can essentially let us step out of character and help process with the same people that we just had this experience with. It's sort of like the suggestion someone has said of horror movies should end with a behind-the-scenes shot so that we can all see these are just people and our brains will realize there's nothing to be afraid of. Very similar idea of if you had a very intense moment with another player because the two of you have characters involved in a very dark plot, now you can step back and you can have that moment where you remember, oh wait, this is my friend Joe. This isn't, the vampire lord that I've been trapped in a 200-year war over. It sounds silly, but if it's silly and it works, then it's not silly. While the other ideas are things like avoid hard subject matter or stay away from very deep plots. Oftentimes, that's what players want, and roleplay bleed is kind of a side effect of that. So while you shouldn't stay away from these sorts of things in general, especially if that's the kind of game you really like, it is a good idea to maybe have some bumper episodes, as it were, whether you're in the same game and you're doing a beach episode is what it's usually called, particularly if you're an anime fan of it's we did something hard, we did something epic, we did something, very, very difficult to get through. Now we have an episode where we catch up on all the silly stuff. We pick up our characters and we go to the beach and we just have a nice day. That can be something if you as a storyteller feel that your players have been going through a lot of hard and heavy stuff and they need a bit of a break, but it's something that sort of requires communication back and forth between you and your players. So check in with them, see how they're feeling, and know the signs to look for. This is important both for players and for storytellers of oftentimes a player won't quite realize that they're having bleed go through, but if you see it as a storyteller, it's a good idea to stop in, ask your player, hey, is everything okay? Are you still having fun? Is this an experience you want to keep having? Do you need an ear? Do you need help processing something? Or is there something I can do to assist? Same thing if you're a fellow player and you see another player going through something. Oftentimes, bleed is kind of like a nightmare, in that if you wake up and you're in a dark room, you're telling yourself it wasn't real, but you're still surrounded by shadows, and all you can see in those shadows are things that scare you. But if you wake up and there's someone next to you in bed, and you say, hey, I just had a horrible nightmare that we were murdered by an axe murderer, they just kind of look at you of these dreams are dumb. It's okay. Go back to sleep. And you get that reassurance. And oftentimes, if you're in a group with a bunch of your friends, that reassurance is very helpful, and it's something a lot of us have gone through, so talking through it, even if it seems silly, even if it feels embarrassing, because, we're all adults here, but for some reason we're getting caught up in the feelings of a made-up werewolf. Again, if it works, it's not dumb. Just take a moment, process, talk through it. We're all friends here. We've all experienced hard moments in gaming. We've all experienced that feeling of really experiencing acting. And the harder you go on that front and the more emotional swells you get, good or bad, the easier it is for that story to sort of, well, bleed into your day-to-day. And it's not something you should necessarily be on the lookout for at all times. It's not a hidden threat that comes with the hobby that it turns out, the religious right was correct all along. But it's one of those minor things that it's sort of like a cavity in your tooth. Of if you check up regularly, if you're brushing, if you're flossing, if you're going through all of the things, then you're at minimal risk of this becoming a problem. But if you're ignoring the signs, if you're telling yourself it's something else, if you're too embarrassed or too afraid to talk about it, it can get out of control until eventually the only solution is to really step back and not do things for a while. And nobody wants that. This is a hobby that requires friends and a group of people we like enjoying make-believe with. But because of that, it's important to be responsible for your feelings and for the way your own imagination works. And sometimes that can be difficult, particularly when we talk about things that scare us or when we talk about things that really stick with us after we've gone through an experience. And it's easier to either write it off and ignore it as something that isn't going to happen to you. It's not your problem. It's not your group's problem. We're not those kind of players. Or it's easier to just not let yourself open up, to not feel things, to just sort of kick back and treat this all as just a TV show that you're only casually watching while browsing your phone. But if you like having those deep experiences, if you like really engaging with the world, with subject matter, with the characters and stories of the people around you, it is a risk that it ends up becoming very intense. And when that intensity occurs, it's important to make sure we process it correctly, because if we don't, that can be baggage that not just you, but the rest of your table has to cope with going forward, and it can have a lot of negative effects on your game, which ironically means that those intense experiences that a lot of us are there for, that we're really engaged with, that we're really interested in, become riskier and riskier, and no one wants to deal with them anymore because it's just not as much of a good time when people have it bleeding over. But that's my little spiel for this week, a little something for folks to be concerned about, to pay attention for going forward. And I wanted to ask everyone out there, what are your biggest experiences with Roleplay Bleed, either from yourself or from someone you shared a table with? Go down in the comments below if it's not too embarrassing, and share it with us. Let us know how you dealt with it. What was the situation that led to it? Was it something really horrifying? Was it something really intense? Or was it something just kind of silly that you found yourself shaking your head over later once you'd gone through it and realized that you had accidentally put fake experiences into your very real brain? But until next time, happy gaming, everyone. Thank you for staying to the end of this episode of Discussions of Darkness. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking the video and sharing it on your own social media to help boost the signal. And if you'd like to help us keep the show and channel going, don't forget to hit that subscribe button as well. If you have any questions about the topic I covered today, or if you have something you'd like to see covered in a future episode, make sure to leave it in the comments below. Lastly, please check out the link in the video description to browse all of my World and Chronicles of Darkness supplements from Azukail Games. So far, we've covered Changeling the Lost, Vampire the Masquerade, Mage the Awakening, and Geist the Sin Eaters, in addition to a handful of general supplements that will be useful for any game set in the World or Chronicles of Darkness settings. Thank you in advance for your support. You're the ones who help us keep the lights on, so we don't fade into the shadows.